Let's start facing towards the camera. Relax. And let's begin with some hip circles. So starting with that right hip, big external rotations. Good, keep playing with that.
I'll check in to see if other people need help.
Okay. Just trying to get the timer set so I can see it. There we go. All right.
I'll just mention really quickly that I woke up and my back was out,
Okay.
and I took a little movement class at Portland State, and that helped. And I've been standing a lot today, so I'm just going to be gentle.
That sounds wonderful. So from here, grabbing the ground with the feet, drawing the belly towards the spine, and raising the head and neck to the ceiling, continuing with those circles. There's no need to push it too hard today.
Yep.
All right, now for that left leg, same thing, great big circles. Good, keep working with that. Excellent. Trying to draw the hip in one big arc on the ground. There you go, rolling the hip around the foot, back in, around, back in. Now adding the grab with those toes, make sure the belly is drawing to the spine and lifting with the head neck. Give more structure to your movement. Good, going nice and slow, making sure you're scribing a great big arc with just that left hip. That's the main focus right now. Good. Excellent. A few more seconds of that. Okay, from here, now we're going to take it in figure eight. So pulling around that right hip, pulling around that left hip more, side to side. Nice and slow. Ascribe one circle and then the other. No need to go fast. Work on the shape. Make sure it stays easy on your body. Nice relaxed bend to the knees. Very gentle drawing of the belly to the spine. Slight raise of the head and neck. Round to round. Play with that for a few more moments. Very nice, very nice. Get a complete circle on each side. If you can, try to bend your knees just a little bit more. Good. It makes it easier to feel that turn through the hips and the pivot on the ankles. Very good. Okay, relax for a moment. And now we're gonna try the opposite direction. So with that right hip, this time inward rotation. This can be a little more challenging than outwards. Again, for those first few moments, go nice and slow. Just try to find that shape.
Were we doing an inward rotation before?
We were doing outward rotation before.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So now we're doing.
Now we're doing inwards. That right hip is coming around.
Oh, just on one side?
Just on the right side for right now, correct. We'll do the left side in just a moment and then both.
Oh,
It's natural for both hips to go a little, but I
yeah.
would focus on one then the other. That way you can feel that isolation, make sure both sides are working well before we get into more complex movement.
Better with the one. Thank you.
Of course, of course. No, it's not an incredibly difficult concept, but it's a hard movement to get in your body, I find.
Oh yeah, that feels much better.
Good, good. And again, it's just you and I, so feel free to ask any questions you have. I want to make sure that you get as much as we can out of the lesson.
I was trying to do both sides every time.
Gotcha, right. And again, it just makes it more complex, right? And so now, let's go to that other leg. Same thing. Don't worry about the first leg now. Just try to create that circle.
Yes.
Rounding it.
Sure.
And this way we loosen everything up in a really gentle way before we get into more complicated stuff.
So good.
A few more seconds of that. Very good isolation. Very nice. And now from here, gradually bring in that figure eight.
Oh, what a difference. I can feel the difference. Yes, thank you.
Of course. And at my daily practice, I do the exact same thing. I always start out one leg, then the other, then both. Again, because it's just such a nice, gentle warm-up.
Yes, that's what we want.
Absolutely. Especially after a hard workout.
Yeah.
Take your time with that roll. Once the shape becomes a little easier to maintain, then start adding in the other elements, the grabbing with the toes. Play with just that for a few minutes. We'll add the next one in just a second.
I've gotten the grabbing of the toes down. That's become my favorite prompt.
Isn't that a neat one?
I love it. It's great for everything, for squats, for everything.
Oh yeah, it just lends so much more stability to the low leg and the knees.
Most people are like sitting back on their heels, losing their balance.
Right. We've all those extra redundancies for balance in the feet if we can use them right.
Yeah.
And then from there, that gentle belly draw. And that belly draw helps that movement of the legs translate up the body towards the shoulders. So it's kind of a catalyst for the base to travel upward. A few more moments of this. Let me check in. Much better. Very nice. Okay, and relax the arms for a second. Relax the legs. So what we're going to do next is add an arm movement onto that hip base. So we're going to start with just the arms and then bring the two together, okay? We raise the arms, the little finger side is forward. And then from there, the arms are going to slice, raise the other side, and slice. Don't worry about the legs yet.
Are my legs moving?
Move a little just to kind of support the movement in the arms, but the focus right now is that vertical figure eight, right? In the hips, there was that horizontal figure eight on that plane towards the ground. Now with the hands, we're describing a vertical figure eight in front of us. Play with that a little bit. Good. The arms raised just a little higher. So the weight of the arms helps carry them down. And then from that drop, they cycle back up and the weight carries. Cycling back and the weight carries. As I'm doing this, I never completely close off my armpits. There's always a little bit of space as I roll side to side. If I close off my arm and bring the arm all the way to my side body, I get kind of stuck here, and it's hard to make a smooth transition. If I leave a little space, I can just roll around that space side to side.
Oh, I feel it, yes. A little bit higher too.
Let's take a look. Much better than the last detail. You want to make sure that both little finger sides are slicing together. Both hands cutting the same way. There you go. Very good, very good. All right, now we're gonna relax the arms for a second and bring the legs back online, and then we're gonna stack the arms on top of our base. So we're gonna go back now to our internal rotation figure eights, the last one we did, the draw to roll, draw to roll. So just take a second to get comfortable with that again. And for right now, just put your hands on your hips for a moment so you can feel how the hips are moving as they roll side to side.
Oh, yes. It's good.
And see how as the hip rolls back to forward, there's a slight lift in the hip before it comes forward?
Yes.
That's going to be kind of our trigger movement to begin the raising of the arms. And so as I roll to the side here, the arm raises with the hip and then slices as the hip sinks. I pull the other side, the arm raises with the hip, slices to the other side. And we're just going to go nice and slow, playing with the timing, because the timing is kind of tricksy. It's hip first, then belly, and then shoulder arms. Hips lead, belly, arms, slice. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So again, going nice and slow. Just play with that roll off the hip. That natural raise of the hip draws the arms up and then slices to the side. We'll keep playing with this. Take a look. Very good. Very good. Do you feel how the hip is moving first and the body kind of responds to that movement?
Yes, I'm not rolling my hip as much though. Just seems like I'm more focused on that up. So
Of course.
I'm to keep rolling. Okay.
Right. And it often goes that way. There's a lot happening here, right? And so as we bring on a new element, the older elements get harder to maintain.
Yeah, it seems like I'm in staccato now.
Right, right. And so to help work with that, again, it's a totally normal place to end up right now.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that hip roll.
It's great.
With just the hips.
Good.
And as you play with this more and more, the pieces will begin to fit together more easily. But right now, they're two very different movements that we're trying to join, and that just takes time.
I'm starting to feel a little of this cross action that you talk about.
Good. That body feel is so important. Without that, it's really hard to understand what the next step is, right?
Right. Oh yeah, the hip coming up really helps.
Yeah, you can really feel that with the hands on them. It makes it really obvious. I can exaggerate it. You can sort of see how much the body can raise as I pull from side to side. Just a few more seconds of this, and I'll bring the hands back. Okay, so now, as we roll the body back, the hip raises and the arms raise off. As we pull the other hip in, that's the draw for the hands to fall. Roll to raise, draw to sink. One and through.
Right. Oh.
It's a nice gentle movement, but it also uses a lot of your body, and it can be quite tiring. So if you need a break, let me know.
Yes, it's so good. I can see doing this every day.
Oh, it's one of my favorite exercises.
Oh, and then the arms are starting to do more of a figure eight now.
Right, because they're playing off of the movement of the hips. The hips are the whole thing.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Good. Let me come by and take another look. There you go. That's great. About 30 more seconds, so we'll change gears a little bit. And relax for a moment. Shake that out.
You know, it's so amazing, Joey, whenever I'm doing something like this and I'm learning, my mind just goes to, I'll never be able to get this. And then slowly it comes and I'm like, why did I feel that way every time?
It's like learning a new language.
Yeah.
You know, when you start learning a new language, there are no friendly words. You can't get by.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
It feels, yeah, exactly.
And then, you know, piece by piece, you get the building blocks, and before you know it, you have sentences, and then you're on your way.
Yeah, nice.
All right, let's do a bit of work with that external rotation again.
Okay.
So again, one hip at a time. Start with that right hip. Just focusing on a single hip. Big circles. We're just going to do 20 seconds aside as we get back into this movement.
And again, it's the up and down.
Right, exactly. But you also feel it's a little more subtle with this one than the
Yeah.
inward rotation.
Yes. I'm also trying to take care of my back.
Right. And when you have considerations like that, health and safety are, of course, the first thing.
Well, it's because I've been, I was, I had the virus for over 2 weeks. And so I was in my house for 16 days
Yeah.
and I sat.
Okay.
And that's why this has happened. So now I'm moving and I'm standing and it's good.
Good. Yeah, sitting will get you.
Yeah.
And now focusing on the other hip, again, just focusing on that one hip, big circles.
Yeah. So I have moderate to severe degeneration of L2 and at my SI joint. So this left side is much harder.
Right. And when you have that kind of medical consideration, again, make
Yep.
sure you're always going gentle and never going into an area of sharp pain.
That's right.
And then from here, as much as your hips and back will let you, start playing with that figure eight.
Oh, that feels really good.
Good. Yeah, my own SI joint regularly goes out of place from the kicking martial arts that I do. And this has done a wonderful thing to stabilize.
You have a resetting exercise?
What's that?
You have a resetting exercise?
I do.
I do too. It works every time.
Exactly.
I'm so grateful.
Oh, it's great getting to work with you. This is fun. I've missed teaching.
I bet.
And so from here, because that hip lift is more subtle for external rotation than internal, it's really important to use that abdominal draw to the spine just a little. You
Yeah.
can feel that raise.
Oh, yeah.
The forward, and then a very slight lift. Round forward, very slight lift as we go side to side.
Yes.
Lifting, lifting. And it's that lift that we're going to build off of. And so from here, as the one hip comes forward, let that same arm sink with it. And the exercise is we're trying to lift that arm up, but we're going to lift from the hip. So as you watch first, as I pull the hip back, the arm rolls over and the other hand comes low. I roll that hip back, the hip rolls, arm follows, other arm comes low.
Yes, it's quite, yes.
It's just like I'm grabbing into a hole and pulling something out by the roots. Lift and draw, lift and draw. I'm going to start very slow like this. And just like in the slicing, I want to keep just a little space in that armpit. If my arms collapse in, I don't have that room to move. My elbows get confused. If I keep some space, I can always roll around that sphere. Hips go, arm follows. Hips go, arm follows. Play with that for a moment. Good. And so as the hip comes in, reaching down the center, as you pull, lifting up and over, as the other hand reaches down that center line. Lift and pull, reach down the center line, lift and pull. And keeping things centered like this allows you to use more of your belly and makes the exercise more consistent side to side.
I feel like now I feel better. I was sitting back a lot.
Yeah,
This feels better when I'm reaching forward a little bit.
good. And again, there's no need to go fast as you're playing with mechanics.
But I saw your shoulders were and your chest was in rather than, so that helps.
Right. And what's happening in my shoulders and chest, I'm concaving the front a little bit, making that empty space.
With this space, and that's laid back. Yep. Nice.
What that helps me to do is you kind of play with that idea of rolling a sphere in front of my body side to side as I draw. Let's take a look. Much better. You feel how you're getting more space in the hips now as you move?
Now I'm starting to roll the hip a little bit.
Right.
It's external, I have to remember.
There you go. Good. And the key to doing this well and smoothly is just, do a couple minutes every day.
Yeah.
There's no fast track, but if you play with it regularly, the movements become clear and everything cleans up with time. About 30 more seconds. All right, and relax for a moment. Nice job.
Wow.
Any questions so far?
Oh, so wonderful. Thank you so much.
Of course, of course. And again, I've posted online detailed breakdowns of this, and so you're welcome to check those out on my YouTube channel.
Yes, I love your YouTube channel.
Awesome. And with your permission, I can also post this video so you can check it out too and review it.
I don't mind if you are okay with all of my talk.
Not at all. It's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
It may help people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's why at first I was like, oh my God, I'm on the video. And then I was like, yeah, but it might help people.
Right. Right. And it's all part of the process of learning.
That's
Okay. So how are your hips and back doing so far?
it. Good.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not too fatigued yet?
No, I'm okay. You're okay.
Good. And so now the next movement we're going to work on is a little more sophisticated. It's that roll, the classic Taiji press.
Oh, yes.
And
Of course. Yes.
it's a beautiful movement. It feels great in the body, and there's so many places to get tripped up on it. So we're going to start very slow.
That's right.
So the first thing we're going to play with are great big circles, okay? And the idea for the circle is I want the body and the hands to go in opposite directions. And I'm making my circles overly large because when they're overly large, it's easy to see. If I was playing here, it'd be very difficult to see what I was doing on the inside. Keep playing with that for a moment. Very good. It's coming along nicely. And now the other direction. Same thing. Good. All right. Changing directions again. So now we're going to take a look at the hips. This constant circle is pretty easy to maintain. But as we go into the press, what we're trying to do is break off that circle on tangent and use that tangent like an escape velocity of a satellite going around a planet to create a press.
Oh, the opposite direction than I thought.
Exactly. And so it's one big circle. That front hip comes around, and then I drill with that back leg, and that drilling motion coming up pushes the hand forward and creates that push. And so again, as we roll, couple rolls, nice and easy. And now from here, as I draw the arms to the side, that front hip comes forward. I roll around that hip, and then I drill that back hip into the ground as I press.
I think I'm on the wrong side. I think I go this way.
Let me take a look. Good. So we're going to do both sides back and forth. Does that sound good?
Okay, I'm just kind of copying you, but you're reversed, you're mirrored.
So we're mirrored, so I will call out, I'll just call my right leg my left leg. Does that sound good to you?
If you can do it.
Oh, I am super dyslexic, so that's no problem at all.
Hey!
I never could do right and left anyways, this is fine. So as we roll to our right, as I come around, that right hip is going to come forward. I'm going to roll that right hip around, and as I drill into that left hip, I press out towards my right.
Press out toward my right or my left?
What's that?
Press out toward my right or my left?
So I'm pushing towards what would be your right.
Yeah, good.
Good. And so now as we roll again, as the hands come forward, I pull that right hip forward as the hands draw back. From here, that right hip circle. I'm doing an external rotation of the hip. From here, that left leg drills into the ground as I push to the right. Let's do one more on that side. Big circles. As the hands come across, pull to the right, pulling that right hip forward. I round that right hip, drill the left, press, and hold for a second. Looking good. So for that hand angle, you want the front hand here at about a 45, and the back hand also at a similar angle. You don't want to go so far to put pressure on the wrists.
Okay.
You want to feel very natural as you press out and fill. You can also see I have that same roundness in my chest.
Okay, yes.
And that gives me all the space to fill as I press out, so I put less pressure on the joints.
So can I say I'm holding the chi here?
Absolutely, yeah, that would be appropriate. Yeah, it's Lao Gong to Lao Gong, pressing out as the body goes back. So that yin is softening, that yang is more secure and stable, and between that we get that expansion.
Yeah, feels good.
Excellent. So once more to that side.
Yes.
Great big circles. And this time as the hands travel to the right, my right hip comes forward again. I round that right leg, drill that left as I press off. And now I'm going to change directions. So take a second. The body always gets confused when you go from one side to the other. So just take a moment, let yourself feel the movement out.
Oh, yes, right. My body's going opposite.
Right. And at home, I really recommend, taking a pause between the actions. That way you can kind of reset.
Yes.
Let your body rest for a moment. And then when you're ready, go into the next movement. One more circle. And so now from here, as my hands travel leftward, that left hip comes forward.
Yes.
I roll that left hip and drill that right hip, and that becomes the same press to the opposite side. And now we're just gonna go back and forth a few times. So now going to the right with the hands. The hands pull to the right, right hip comes forward, roll the right hip, drill into the left. Changing sides. One more big circle. The hands travel leftward. That left hip comes forward. Roll the left, drill the right, and change sides again. We'll do two more of these. Great big circles. One more great big circle is that right hip comes forward. Roll the right hip, drill the left to press, changing sides.
How do you change sides? Because I keep looking at my hands.
Oh, no worries. So
My hands are up.
as I press to the right, I just take the hands and move them to the left.
Oh, that's good. Thank you.
And so if you watch for a second, I can just go press, press,
Yes.
and you can make a really fun little drill out of that.
Nice.
Yeah, and so we'll get into that in 1 second, but we'll do one more press and we'll talk for a moment. So as again, as I press to that right, there's that circle to the left. And as the hands come around once more, that left hip comes forward. I roll the left, drill the right to press. Shake that for a moment. We're gonna do more in just a second of that. Does the distinction between rolling and drilling the hip make sense to you?
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes. Except that I'm having a little, because after I roll, I'm kind of straightening up. So there seems like there's a little bit of a gap there. So when
Right.
I'm rolling the hip, right? Rolling forward, right? And then when I drill, so I kind of straighten up at this point and then drill back.
Right. And connecting those two pieces is a tricky little piece. It's a tricky part of this puzzle. I find the best way of building on that is just the isolation of one leg and then the other, internal to external rotation, so you can really feel how the body responds in those shapes. And it does feel kind of jolty the first few months, I find, but the more you play with it, the more it will smooth and the smaller that gap will become. If you watch me for a second.
Yes.
So this part is looking really smooth, right? The challenge is here to there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the way that I figure that out in my own practice is that here, that first movement is just external rotation.
Just that. Yeah. That's what I thought, but I couldn't make the smooth between the next one. Yeah.
Right. And so from that external rotation, there's a roll, and then the back part of that stroke, do you feel how your other hip kind of stretches a little?
Yes.
Then you just drill into that.
And that gives you the chance to drill. Yeah.
Exactly. That's the trigger to go from one to the other. And finding that space smoothly and repetitiously, it's challenging. But if you remember that all those pieces are things that you've broken down in the simpler parts of the class, you can use that, part of your study to help bolster and build the more sophisticated parts later on.
Right. So great.
Because every part of this you've done, it's just putting it together that's challenging.
Right. Water. Good idea. Good idea.
Otherwise, my voice will be gone.
You have a good mic. Are you using a mic?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds really good.
I've been chasing my kids around all day, so the voice gets a little hoarse after that.
I just got a Yeti mic today in the mail, so I'm so excited.
Yeah, that's what I use. They're wonderful.
No, good. That's what you use. Oh, see? Perfect.
Very intuitive setup, very easy to kind of modify.
Great.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to yell.
Exactly. It makes everything calmer. And so let's go back to that movement a little bit more, because it's such a nifty one. And so now what we're going to do is work on that transition from the one into the other. And you see how the key is that my hips have to be loose, right? But if I don't have those parameters of the belly draw and the foot grab, my body doesn't know where to go, and I lose a lot of energy, and it doesn't feel as good on my joints. And so as we go slowly here, we're gonna try to make sure we can maintain that foot draw and the belly draw to give some sense of shape to all of this. So with the hands rolling to begin with. As I draw my hands to the right, that right hip comes forward. Externally rotate that right hip, and then on that backstroke, drill and press with that left leg. It's an active press. It's not a collapse in a sink. I want to make sure that there's energy going down and coming up.
Yes.
Stability and scaffolding the movement.
Yeah, good.
And then from there, as we go now to the left, one more big circle. And now as the hands roll leftward, that left hip rolls up. I externally rotate that left hip. And as that hip comes back, I drill, but also press that right leg into the ground. So I can feel my weight drawing down, but also rising up.
Oh, I love that.
Create.
Yes.
And now from here, we're going to go really slow. We're going to do one big arc. That arc pulls that right hip up.
Oh.
Externally rotate that right hip. As it comes back, drill and press left.
Oh, that feels so nice.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yes.
And then for that pressure, draw to the other side. As we draw leftward, that left hip comes up. The left hip externally rotates. As it comes back, that's our trigger to drill and press with that right leg. We're just going to go back and forth, nice and slow, this time with the right. As the hands travel back, it pulls that right hip up. Right hip externally rotates as it comes back, drilling into that left leg. Back around. Pulling that left hip up. Externally rotating that left hip as it comes back. That's the pulse to drill into that right leg. Let's do 4 more of these. Back around. Pulling that right leg up. Externally rotating that right leg. Drill left. Round. Pulling that left leg up. Externally rotating that left leg. Drill right.
Oh, externally rotating.
It makes such a difference.
Oh my God.
Again, it's just that hip roll we've done a million times, right?
Oh.
But it's that hip roll into that drill. Hip roll into that drill.
It's coming around, but then it had, yes, but then it had to externally rotate for the drill to I see it.
Yeah.
I felt it.
Good. And what's so cool about this is once you feel a little bit, so many of the pieces cascade into place.
Yeah.
And especially if you review it a little bit tomorrow, if you play with the same idea for the next couple days, and I'll try to get this video up tomorrow morning so you can use this as reference. It makes such a difference in how much you retain and how much you can build off that information. So again, let's just a couple more. As I draw my hands to the right, right hip comes forward, externally rotate into that drill. Draw around, left hip comes forward, externally rotating that left hip, drilling into the right, and 2 more, we'll take a short break. Round, right hip comes forward, externally rotating that right hip as the hip goes back, drilling that left leg to press. Last one. Bringing that left hip around, externally rotating the left, drill right and press.
Oh.
Now let's take a minute to shake that out. Any questions so far?
Nope, it's gonna just take some practice.
That one does, but it answers so many of the more difficult movement questions in internal martial arts. That movement pattern is called 7-star coiling. And the 7 stars are the stars of the Big Dipper in Chinese cosmology, right? And so you have the pan and that pan handle going off the side. And the idea is that really good movement, really powerful movement, follows that circle of the pan, and then when given the proper trigger, breaks that orbit and accelerates off along that pan handle.
Oh, beautiful.
And it's the same kind of physics that a satellite would use to slingshot around a planet. Right? Use that gravity well to draw in, arc around, and then off to the other side. And so we're playing with this movement, so you can watch for a second. The figure 8, that's our pan. That's our pan hand, our circular pan, right? It's a constant thing. There's no end to it. There are no hard corners. And then as soon as we add in that break, all that power comes up and expresses around on that arc. And so it takes those circles, and it doesn't make them lines so much as it stretches them out and makes them more dynamic.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Does that all make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. Any questions so far?
No, that's great.
Okay. Do you want to play with this movement in a different context or try a different movement?
Whatever you think.
Okay. Let's try this with stepping a couple of times and see how that feels.
Okay,
And then we'll see where we are.
all right.
Awesome. Again, you're making such good progress. I'd love to stick to this one thing and make sure that you leave the class with a really good idea of how to do this.
I love that. Thank you.
Awesome. And so in the context of the first form of Li Taiji, the style of Taiji that we're practicing, this movement makes up the first 7 basic steps, okay? And the idea is that from this press out, there's a roll. That roll draws in that back hip. There's the external rotation of the hip as we draw around it. And then we drill into that back leg. And then from there, there's a roll. That roll pulls that left back leg up. The left leg comes around. We round that left hip, drill into the right. And so now we're kind of stepping off of this V pattern, side to side as we move along the floor. Give it a try?
Okay.
All right. We're going to start with the left hand in front, left foot forward, pressing off on that 45. And the first new move here is that reaching of that front left hand and a vertical roll like we're rolling a ball. As that hand reaches this downstroke, it pulls the hip up.
Yes.
And let's play with that a couple of times. So we're back to our start, or back to our set. Left hand reaches. I roll that ball. The ball comes up and over. As it begins its descent, it pulls that left hip up and draws my feet together.
Yes.
Let's do 2 more on that side. Press, reach, roll, to pull. Once more on this side, that left hand forward. Set to the reach, roll, and now pulling that right leg up. And now from here, just to continue around, that right leg is going to circle out to the side. We're going to roll around that right hip externally, and then drill into that left hip as we press, and now we're facing the other direction.
Yes.
We're going to do the same thing 3 times on this side.
Okay.
That right hand now reaches. The left hand comes up and over, and as that left hand begins descent, it pulls that left hip up. The feet touch, resetting with that right hand forward. From the set, to the reach, to the roll. Take your time with that roll and feel how as soon as we cross the apex into that descent, there's a stretch that goes all the way back, that back heel, and hold that foot up. Once more from that set. Right hand comes to forward, rolling the left hand up and over, feeling that stretch in the hip, pulling that left leg up. Reset, and I'll talk you through one so I can watch. So from that set, good. The front hand corrects. Roll that ball, pulling the hip up as the hand comes down. Very nice, very nice. And that kind of coordinated movement you just demonstrated with the hands pulling the hips is one of the more challenging and important aspects of this sort of training. The idea that the whole body moves together and as one unit.
Yes.
Any questions so far?
No, I did that with, that feeling of moving the leg up with the hands. I did that with parting the horse's mane when I was kind of studying, and I got that connection about how the hands were pulling up that leg. So that felt natural to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, it's a vital little piece. And once that comes into play more and more in your training, a whole bunch of new things will open up because that idea is consistent. There aren't any movements that don't have that element. And so just finding out where that timing is in the specific shapes, and everything kind of cascades together from there. Let's go back and forth a couple times with this. Starting on that left side, that left hand forward, right hand in the back, left hand corrects, roll that ball, pulling that right hip up. And now as I pull that hip up, the hands and the foot cross just a little. Do you see that?
Okay, yes.
And as I step out, they cross a second time. Now as I pull in that forward right leg, my body externally rounds that hip. And again, just like in the stationary version of this, as I come around behind, that's the impulse to drill into that back left leg as I press. Right hand reaches, roll the ball, pulling as I draw that left hip up, hands and foot cross once, hands and left foot cross twice. I pull the body into that left leg as I externally round it. And just like before, if I go back, that's a signal to drill into the other hip.
Oh, I love it.
And see, it's a really nice kind of logical continuation of that first exercise. Left hand reaches. Roll that ball. As the hand begins to sink, I pull that right hip up. Hands and foot cross once. Hands and foot cross twice. Drawing the weight into that right leg as I round externally and drill into that left. Let's do two more of these. Set. Roll. Pull. Crossing hands and feet once. Crossing twice. Pulling into that left foot. Externally rotate. Drilling right. One last one from here. And reaches. Rolling that right hand up and over. Pulling that right hip in. Crossing once. Twice. Rolling to the outside. Drilling and pressing. And relax. How's that feeling?
Oh, beautiful.
Good. Good. You're doing great. This is not easy stuff.
I feel good.
Any questions for me?
Nope.
Do you feel like you have enough from this to practice on your own?
Yes.
Good, good. And again, I'll try to get this video up in the next, 24 hours or so to make sure you have this as a reference also. It can be really helpful to have that.
Oh, great.
Tricks.
Then I'll be ready for Saturday.
Excellent, excellent. Me too. So let's finish off class with just a few minutes of light standing, and then we'll call it a night. Does that sound good?
It sounds perfect.
Wonderful. And so for our standing holding post, we're going to start with our feet together. From here, I want the weight to pour from my left hip into my right hip, like I'm pouring water in a tea kettle from one leg into the next. As that left leg lightens, I can peel it off the ground, step off the side just a bit beyond shoulder width, and my weight fills that space in the middle. I'm going to take a second, let that weight shift forward and back. Find your balance, make sure it's really comfortable. And then gradually we're going to bring in our three main postural elements, like grabbing the ground with the feet, drawing the belly to the spine, and that raising gently of the head and neck towards the ceiling. From there, I'm going to gently let my weight sink. And as my weight sinks, I want to make sure my pelvis stays lined up so that as I sink down a little, I feel all the weight in my thighs. If my pelvis posteriorly rotates at all, I don't feel weight in the thighs, but that means that it all goes into the knees instead, which I want to avoid. So again, as I drop down, I want to make sure the thighs are engaged, not burning, but active. And the pelvis is engaged as well, so my knees can be protected. Does that make sense?
Yes.
From that sink, the arms raised just a little. And in this new position, I once again run through that basic checklist, grabbing with the toes, drawing the belly to the spine, raising the head, neck. And then I add in concaving the chest, which I achieve. I feel like I'm knitting my two clavicle bones, my collarbones. I want them to draw to the middle just a little. And as they do that, the scapula, the big flat bones back here, draw to the side, rounding out. And now it's like I'm holding a big basin of water. There's slight space between each of the fingers, and a slight reach as the fingertips reach for each other across the center of my body. Keep holding for a second more. Very good, very good. Make sure there is space in the shoulders, right on that inside. It's like I'm stretching around a sphere just a little bit. And the elbows sink just a little as well. About 30 more seconds. The arms gently sink. Raising as I pull the body onto that right leg. I'm here for you. Your hands draw down. Coming to the belly. Left hand over the right for women. Right hand over the left for men. Rounding the belly. changing directions. And close. Very nicely done.
Thank you, sir. You're a
Oh.
wonderful teacher.
It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in tonight.
Yeah, yeah. I'll see you on Saturday.
Sounds good. Have a lovely evening.
You too. Stay
Bye.
well. Bye.